Lincoln is out to see his son LJ when a speeding truck is seen rushing in their direction. Soon, the speeding truck crashes against the prison vehicle, causing Lincoln and 3 prison guards to be tossed on the side of the road. Shortly after, Agent Kellerman arrives at the scene, implying that he was the one who arranged the crash. Kellerman walks towards Lincoln, attempting to smother him to death. Just then, another car appears and a man steps out of the vehicle. The man knocks Kellerman unconscious using a fire extinguisher before bringing Lincoln into his car with him. They drive to an old junkyard while he lets Lincoln recover. When Lincoln wakes up, he learns that it was his father who saved him from Kellerman and brought him to the junkyard. His father, Aldo, admits that he knows everything about Agent Kellerman, the vice president, and the company. Aldo reveals to Lincoln that he used to work for the company, a group of multinationals that is powerful enough to control everything from the law, the officials, and the war. In order to fully take on a position in the company, Aldo has forced himself to abandon Lincoln and Michael to keep him safe. But when he left the company, he had very valuable information with him, which is mainly the reason why Lincoln was framed for murder. Aldo emphasizes that every day he regrets that he left his family. However, Lincoln is enraged upon hearing his explanation and cannot make himself forgive Aldo. Lincoln blames his father for all the misfortunes that are happening in their family, especially Lisa's death and Michael and LG's imprisonment. In the Fox River prison yard, Sucre is released from being solitary as he reunites with his cousin Manch, Michael, and the rest of the breakout team. Michael gives the team updates regarding their escape route, saying that their map is ready because he has retrieved the missing blueprints. He tells them that the only thing they need left is the key to the infirmary. Just then, a bus arrives inside the prison, revealing John Abruzzi among the arriving prisoners. He has returned to Fox River after his fight with T-Bag, claiming that he is a changed man. During lunch, Abruzzi gives Michael a hug and expresses how he is thankful to God for the new life that was given to him. Michael then updates him on a new plan, asking Abruzzi if the newly transformed him still wants to cooperate. Abruzzi gives a positive answer. Later that day, Abruzzi visits T-Bag in his cell. He intends to move on from their previous fight and proposes a truce, to which T-Bag reluctantly accepts. T-Bag has become wary of Abruzzi's presence, so he takes a cold shank and is about to kill Abruzzi in his cell, but C-Note stops him. In the meantime, Michael is working on obtaining the keys to the door of the infirmary. Knowing that only the medical staff has the keys to the door, Michael thinks of using his connection with Sarah. While Sarah disinfects his back burn, Michael seizes the opportunity to manipulate her. Michael brushes his lips against Sarah, to which she responds, but he finds himself unable to steal the keys from her pocket. With this in mind, Michael tries to talk to Tweener, asking him to swipe the keys from the medical staff instead, but Tweener is not open to making a deal with Michael without any conditions. Tweener says that he will only agree to get the keys if Michael will help him get rid of his cellmate Avocado. In desperation, Tweener reveals that Avocado has been sexually assaulting him every day. He also shares to Michael that he was imprisoned because he casually stole a Honus Wagner baseball card, not knowing that it was worth a lot of money. Since Michael is unable to do Tweener's request of eliminating Avocado, he turns to Nika. He calls Nika, requesting her to steal the keys from Sarah. Nika initially refuses him, but sometime later, she invites Sarah for lunch and swiftly steals the keys from her. Afterwards, Nika visits Michael in Fox River and hands him the keys, giving him a chance to create a duplicate copy. However, Sarah soon learns that her keys to the infirmary are missing. When Sarah realizes that she could not find her keys after coming back from lunch with Nika, she immediately suspects her. Furthermore, she checks the visitation list and discovers that Nika had visited Michael just then. Fumed, Sarah deliberately has the locks changed while treating Michael coldly during his medical appointment. Meanwhile, Warden Pope finds out from Captain Bellick that Lincoln has disappeared. Pope initially panics in fear that his negligence towards Lincoln may be how he will be remembered by the media throughout his career. In turn, Bellick relieves Pope that they will find Lincoln before the media discovers that he is missing. He urges Pope not to report the incident for the meantime while he and the sheriffs find him. Later, Bellick finds Kellerman and his vehicle at the location of the crash. He is about to question Kellerman, but he rushes to drive away from the place. Back at the junkyard, Lincoln wonders what his execution means to the company. In reply, Aldo confesses that he was the one who leaked the scandal about Stedman's company, Ecofield. Thus, the company has planned to cover up the scandal using Lincoln as payback to Aldo's betrayal and to make him come forward. Aldo plans on helping Lincoln escape for good, but a civilian in the junkyard spots their location. Upon hearing the news, Bellick and the police officers drive to the junkyard. Kellerman, who has intercepted their comms, also follows them, intent on killing Lincoln. The police and Kellerman arrive at the junkyard at the same time, but Kellerman finds Lincoln first. As Kellerman points his gun at Lincoln, Lincoln spots Bellick, surrenders himself to the officers to save himself from Kellerman. Lincoln parts ways with Aldo as he is taken away by Bellick and the officers back to Fox River. Warden Pope punishes Lincoln the moment he steps foot in Fox River. He puts Lincoln in 24-hour surveillance, suspecting that he has an accomplice for his sudden disappearance. Around the same time, Nick and Veronica continue to track down the contact numbers from Quinn's phone. Veronica learns that the phone has been receiving calls from various states and nations, and that there is a common number in all the phone records they tracked. When she checks on the number, its location directs them to Blackfoot, Montana. Nick, on the other hand, is distracted during their work. It is then revealed that Abruzzi is behind all the threats towards Nick and is the one who has been instructing him to keep an eye on Veronica. Abruzzi calls Nick, reminding him about their agreement in which he will take Veronica to the Goose Park airstrip by the time Abruzzi calls him again. Inside his cell, Tweener is in distress, trying to find a way to avoid Avocado. He has been constantly pleading to Captain Bellick to transfer him to another cell, but Bellick denies his request. Michael has also refused to help him in killing Avocado. In desperation, Tweener decides to use a razor blade to slice off Avocado's sexual organ. Sucre and Michael later hear about what happened to Avocado. Feeling guilty, Michael talks to Tweener later in the yard. Michael hints him about their plan to break out and ultimately decides to include him in the team. However, Tweener tells Bellick about the group's plan to escape in exchange for the cell transfer. As soon as he hears the information from Tweener, Bellick rushes to the break room. He hammers down the concrete floor beneath the carpet and finds the hole. Bellick stares at the hole, fascinated at what he just discovered. But just before he can do anything, Westmoreland arrives at the break room and hits Bellick with a shovel. A fight ensues between the two as Westmoreland tries to stop Bellick from leaving the room. Westmoreland manages to knock him unconscious, but his abdomen area is stabbed by a shard of glass. Before leaving the break room, Westmoreland ties him up and drops him inside the hole. Out in the yard, the breakout team discusses their final preparations for their coming escape. T-Bag mentions that the police dogs might catch them during their breakout, advising everyone to get rid of their scents to confuse the dogs. Michael agrees and instructs everyone to scrub down their cells. In the middle of their discussion, Westmoreland arrives and informs them about the fight with Bellick, who has discovered their plan and that he is hidden inside the hole underneath the carpet. As a result, Michael has decided that they will break out of Fox River as soon as it gets dark. Abruzzi is instructed to get the plane ready for that night, while C-Note is tasked to steal as much peroxide as he can from the kitchen. The team also changes their escape route since the hole in the break room has been discovered. Michael sets their escape at 7 o'clock that night as they conspire to leave after dinner through the hole in Michael and Sucre's cell. Due to the time constraint, the breakout team only has 60 minutes to reach the wall before the guards start noticing them. As they all return to their cells, Michael glances at Tweener, seemingly aware that he was the one who told Bellick about the hole. Later, Michael meets Sarah in the infirmary for their regular medical appointment. Still furious, Sarah looks at him coldly and waits for him to admit that he stole the keys. Michael then confesses that he had the keys stolen. At this moment, he is working on their escape route, in which they have to access the door to the infirmary. He tells Sarah the truth behind the keys, admitting to his plan to break his brother Lincoln out of the prison. When Sarah finds out that the breakout team will be escaping through the infirmary, she realizes that she was a part of Michael's plan all along. Hurt, she warns Michael that she will not break the law by aiding a criminal. Michael, on the other hand, insists that Lincoln is innocent and encourages her to help and become a part of the solution. Moreover, he points out that he is only asking her to make a mistake by leaving the door of the infirmary unlocked when she leaves. When Sarah asks if Michael has just been acting all along, he confesses that it was initially an act, but that he developed feelings towards her in the process. Unable to reply, Sarah leaves him and walks out of the room. Outside Fox River, Veronica confirms that there is a mansion in Montana that was purchased through a trust fund that is financed by the estate of Terrence Stedman. She informs Nick to pack up for their trip in Montana and to check on the mansion. Back in the prison yard, Abruzzi calls his right-hand man, Maggio, telling him to prepare the plane and a van for that night. Maggio curiously asks Abruzzi why is he sending a small plane with 3 seats when there are 8 of them. Abruzzi then says that not everyone is welcome to get on the plane, and that the seats will be for the 3 who will remain alive. Shortly after, Abruzzi also calls Nick to inform him that he needs to get Veronica at the airstrip that night. Nick protests at the sudden change of plans, but Abruzzi dismisses him. Later that day, Veronica rushes Nick to the airport for their flight in Montana. To her surprise, Nick aims his gun at her, stopping her from leaving the apartment. During their yard time at Prison Industries, C-Note briefly confronts Michael about the tension between T-Bag and Abruzzi. C-Note tells Michael that T-Bag almost killed Abruzzi as he hands the cold shank to him. Before leaving, he urges Michael to be more aggressive in handling them because the unnecessary fights might negatively affect their escape. After their shift, Michael gathers the entire breakout team inside the locker room. As Michael gives them instructions about their working jumpsuits, C-Note shuts Michael up, alarmed that Tweener is listening with them inside the locker room. Michael then reveals that Tweener is coming with them, making everyone agitated. To calm them down, he says that he owes Tweener a favor, justifying his addition to the team. In the warden's office, Pope watches excitedly as Michael is placing the finishing touches on the Taj Mahal model and thanks him for his assistance in the Taj Mahal model. Feeling indebted, Pope also reminds Michael that he can seek his help whenever he needs it. At that moment, Michael decides to claim the favor and requests Warden Pope to let him see Lincoln. Inside the SHU, Lincoln shares his previous encounter with their father, but Michael does not listen to him, looking preoccupied. Michael is in a rush, thinking for ways to sneak Lincoln out of his cell. He then informs Lincoln on their change of plans, including their decision to break out that night. Being in 24-hour surveillance, Lincoln urges Michael to leave him behind and escape by themselves. In the kitchen, C-Note is in the middle of stealing peroxide when his former right-hand man, Trumpets, finds him. Trumpets is visibly disappointed at C-Note, seeing that he is running errands for their supposed enemies, Teabag, and the other white prisoners. As soon as Trumpets provokes him, C-Note splashes peroxide over his face and subdues him before running away. Around the same time, Sarah leaves Fox River to clear her mind. She goes inside a bar, where she hears the news about her father, the governor, being a possible candidate for vice presidency. Eventually, Sarah suspects that it has something to do with Lincoln's case, so she goes to talk to her father in a restaurant. Inside, Sarah asks him if he reviewed all the information concerning Lincoln's case. Governor Frank initially does not answer, but he later admits that he did not need to read it. Moreover, Frank scolds Sarah for being too brazen when he has been using his influence to protect her when she was an addict. Enraged and hurt, Sarah storms out of the restaurant. Back in Fox River, the members of the breakout team begin their final preparations for their second escape attempt. Teabag collects the stinky Brussels sprouts from the other inmates and crushes it against his bunk to get rid of his scent. Abruzzi takes out the fertilizer he had stolen and spreads it across his mattress. Westmoreland is also working on scrubbing his cell while enduring the pain from his stabbed abdomen. Sucre and Michael are inside their cell bleaching their jumpsuits using peroxide to match the white jumpsuits of the inmates in the psychiatric ward. Meanwhile, Tweener is still contemplating if he should join them or completely expose their plans. When he finds out that Avocado has recovered and will join him in the evening, Tweener ultimately decides to come with the breakout team. Meanwhile, Bellick finally wakes up and finds himself bound and trapped inside the hole. Realizing his situation, he goes berserk while trying to break free from the bounds. He shouts out to call the attention of the guards, but they don't hear him. Some time later, Bellick finds a jagged metal behind him and starts rubbing it against the rope around his hands. Back in Pope's office, two correctional officers assist Pope in carrying the Taj Mahal model. However, the model collapses as soon as they lift it. Warden Pope then panics and immediately summons Michael in his office. Shortly after, a concerned officer noticed that Bellick was missing. Pope learns about this and instructs the guards to check if Bellick's truck is parked inside Fox River. As Michael enters, Pope expresses his distress at the seemingly damaged Taj Mahal model. Just then, Michael takes out a piece from his pocket, revealing to Pope that it is the support beam of the Taj Mahal model. In confusion, Pope asks Michael why he took it, but Michael does not answer. Instead, Michael apologizes to Pope as he takes out the cold shank he got from C-Note. Michael points the shank at him before telling Pope that he is breaking out of Fox River with Lincoln. At that moment, Pope receives a message from a guard that they found Bellick's truck. Michael threatens Pope, making him reply to the guard that Bellick is just taking his personal time. Pope warns him, saying that they will never make it over the walls. On the other hand, Michael remains firm, forcing Warden Pope to transfer Lincoln to the infirmary. Afterwards, he ties Warden Pope on a chair and knocks him unconscious inside a wardrobe. Michael casually returns to his cell 5 minutes before their scheduled breakout. He checks his watch while Sucre and the rest of the team anxiously waits in their cell. Westmoreland, on another note, is losing more blood as the time passes. He quietly cleans his wound inside his cell, enduring the excruciating pain on his abdomen. Soon, the jail doors slide open, allowing the inmates to get out of their cells. While Michael and Sucre guard their cell door, the rest of the members sneak in their white jumpsuits. As soon as Michael unscrews the toilet on their cell, C-Note enters the hole to hide from Trumpets, who is intent on killing him. One by one, the rest of the team carefully walks into Michael and Sucre's cell while carrying their white jumpsuits. Realizing that they are already 10 minutes behind, the escaping inmates fasten their pace as they crawl through the pipes. Bellick, still hidden in the hole under the break room, manages to free himself from the rope tied on his hands. He furiously rips the duct tape from his mouth and shouts for help in hopes of getting the other officers' attention. Just then, Michael and the rest of the team hear Bellick's yells, making them stop by the hole under the break room to shut him up. U-Bag hurries behind Bellick to cover his mouth while holding a blade on his face. They manage to subdue Bellick before the guards discover them. Later on, the escaping inmates drag Bellick across the pipes, stealing his hat and jacket. Bellick sees Tweener along with the group and is about to reveal Tweener's betrayal, but Tweener punches him to prevent him from talking. The breakout team gathers under the manhole in the prison yard as Michael tells everyone to put on their white jumpsuits. He activates the fire alarm in the psych ward to get the psych inmates out of the building. Realizing that it was a false alarm, the psych inmates are taken back inside the psych ward just in time for the breakout team to blend in with them. Disguised as a correctional officer, Michael leads the rest of the team inside. However, the personnel in the psych ward get suspicious after recognizing Abruzzi. In a desperate attempt, Michael injects a sedative on the personnel's neck, causing him to collapse on the floor. The breakout team then hurries down the hallway and into the basement of the psych ward. Outside the prison, Sarah is in deep thought about Michael's request. That night, she drives back to Fox River while trying to calm herself. On her way to the infirmary, she finds Lincoln being taken into the doctor's office for examinations. At that moment, Sarah figures out that Michael's escape has started. She uses her keys to unlock the infirmary and looks around until she notices the vials of morphine. After a while, Sarah exits the infirmary and leaves the door unlocked. Her nurse assistant, Katie, spots her right outside and informs her about the false alarm at the psych ward. Sarah, however, dismisses her and hurriedly gets out of Fox River. Later, she weeps while sitting inside her car, feeling confused and distressed by what she did. Back in the psych ward basement, Michael stops Tweener while the other escaping inmates climb down the drain. Michael tells Tweener that he knows about his betrayal with Bellick. Regardless, he has allowed Tweener to join them because he feels indebted to him. On another note, Michael emphasizes that as soon as they are out of Fox River, Tweener will be on his own. Halfway through their escape, Westmoreland grows even more pale due to his injury. C-Note notices his troubled look, subtly concerned if Westmoreland can make it out. Nonetheless, Westmoreland insists that he wants to keep going. Soon later, the whole group reaches the hallway to the infirmary. There, they find Lincoln along with a prison guard. The guard is forced to uncuff Lincoln before T-Bag knocks the guard unconscious. Unbeknownst to the team, T-Bag takes the handcuffs and carries it with him. Elsewhere, Vice President Reynolds and Agent Kellerman meet in her office. Reynolds is in distress when she learns that she was not invited to a fundraising event. Kellerman consoles her, but Reynolds suspects that the company no longer wants to support her presidential candidacy. At the same time, two men from the company discuss what to do with Vice President Reynolds. Their contact, Brinker, appears and shares that Reynolds can be ruthless because of her strong desire to be president. She hints them to be careful with their decision because Reynolds may do something in return that can harm them. Meanwhile, Veronica looks at Nick confusingly and asks him who he is working for. Nick explains that Abruzzi's men started approaching him after he took on Lincoln's case and that he agreed on the deal because they threaten his father's freedom. As it turns out, Abruzzi wants to hold Veronica hostage in case Michael does not keep his promise on revealing Fibonacci's location. He then instructs Veronica to make sure that Michael gives Abruzzi the details on Fibonacci so her life can be spared. Veronica, however, is hurt that Nick had lied to her. She also thinks that Abruzzi will not keep her alive, begging Nick to spare her. Nick just ignores her pleas, dragging her into the car and puts a cloth over her head. However, on their way to the airstrip, Nick changes his mind and stops the car. He releases Veronica and leads her to a cab to the airport, encouraging her to continue her investigation on Stedman. Before they part ways, Nick apologizes to Veronica for all the trouble he had caused her. Nick quickly calls his father to meet him in his apartment, but when he arrives, Abruzzi's other henchman is already inside. As the henchman points his gun at Nick's father, he asks Nick where Veronica is. Nick does not reply, prompting the henchman to kill his father. Soon after, the henchman shoots Nick on the shoulder and asks him again. Nick laughs at the henchman, telling him that Veronica is nowhere near them. In dismay, the henchman shoots Nick and ultimately kills him. Back in the infirmary, Michael and the breakout team gather outside the door. Michael anxiously touches the door handle, unsure if Sarah has accepted his request. When he finds the door unlocked, Michael smiles in relief. Everyone rushes inside, on the move to get rid of the bars on the window. They tie a fire hose to the bar and use the force from the elevator to tear it off. Just then, Haywire appears in the infirmary. All the while, Haywire has been secretly following them from the psych ward. He holds a radio with him, threatening Michael and the other inmates to let him join their escape. Without much time to contemplate, Lincoln decides to let Haywire join them. Lincoln climbs out of the window first, grabbing onto a thick cable that leads to the outer wall of Fox River. He quickly crosses through the cable and makes it to the other end while carrying the piled jumpsuits with him. Abruzzi follows after Lincoln, and the two prepare to assist the rest of the breakout team. But while Sucre and Haywire cross the thick cable, Westmoreland collapses on the ground. Michael and C-Note check his abdomen and find out that he has lost too much blood. Knowing that he wouldn't make it any farther, Westmoreland makes Michael promise that he would visit his sick daughter when he is outside the walls. Ultimately, he reveals that his hijacked money amounting to $5 million is buried under a cello at Utah, saying that the money is enough for all of them to split. Westmoreland bids farewell to Michael as T-Bag and C-Note begin to cross the cable. Around the same time, Becky, Warden Pope's secretary, starts to wonder why Pope has not come out yet. When she enters his office, she does not see him inside. Confused, Becky calls the attention of the correctional officers. The guards look for Warden Pope around Fox River, but fail to find him as well. As Becky calls Pope's cell phone, they hear the sound of his phone coming from the drawer. To their surprise, Becky and the officers find Warden Pope tied up and gagged inside. Pope, who has already gained consciousness, urgently orders the officers to sound the alarm. The prison alarm rings all over Fox River while Michael is in the middle of crossing the cable. Mancha also follows behind Michael, but his weight drags down the cable, causing it to disconnect from the wall of the infirmary. Michael's back crashes on the other side of the wall, while Mancha falls on the prison yard. Lincoln, who is waiting for him on the other side, helps Michael climb up and over the wall. Mank, however, fails to cross the wall as he is captured by the officers. An officer strangles Mank, demanding him to give the names of his accomplices. One by one, Mank cites the members of the breakout team: Michael, Lincoln, Sucre, Tweener, T-Bag, C-Note, Abruzzi, Westmoreland, and Haywire. Warden Pope hurries to the infirmary and confirms that 8 prisoners have escaped. As he looks at the broken window, he also sees Westmoreland sitting lifeless on the floor. Back in the general population, the inmates cheer in celebration for the members of the breakout team who made it out of Fox River. Warden Pope walks into Michael and Sucre's cell, where he finds the toilet unscrewed and the hole on their wall. Later, Bellick is also found under the hole in the break room. Filled with rage, Bellick immediately requests for his shotgun, determined to catch the escaped prisoners. Warden Pope gathers a crowd of officers, instructing them to spread out and find them no matter what it takes. Right outside the gates of Fox River, Michael and the breakout team are hiding in the bushes. They wait for the officers to get ahead of them before they start running through the forest area. Lincoln assists the inmates through a barbed wire fence, but Tweener hurts his hand along the way. Seeing Haywire still in his white jumpsuit, Lincoln demands him to remove it, but Haywire refuses. Abruzzi later leads them to an old mill, where a blue van is waiting for them. While the inmates ride the van, Michael destroys its tail lights to further conceal the van in the dark. Tweener mindlessly touches a wall with his bleeding hand, causing it to leave a blood print. Inside the van, Abruzzi tricks Haywire into getting the keys in the garbage can. As Haywire steps out to look for the keys, Abruzzi gives Lincoln the real keys and drives away without Haywire. While driving across Fifth Street, T-Bag becomes suspicious of Abruzzi for riding at the back, but Abruzzi does not answer him. Instead, Abruzzi prepares to take the hidden pistol underneath T-Bag's seat. Just before Abruzzi can shoot the pistol on T-Bag, T-Bag cuffs his wrist with Michael's. T-Bag warns Abruzzi that if he shoots him, Michael will be forced to drag his dead body with him, which could affect their escape and eventually Abruzzi's access to Fibonacci's location. In response, Michael and Abruzzi work on getting the key from T-Bag, but he swallows it. Later, Lincoln notifies everyone that the officials have blocked the main road to the Goose Park airstrip. Michael catches sight of a small road on the side, but as they drive towards it, their van gets stuck in the mud. Therefore, Lincoln and the rest of the breakout team start moving on foot towards the airstrip. Michael stays behind and grabs hold of Tweener. At that point, Michael tells Tweener that he is on his own as part of their deal. Unable to do anything, Tweener walks away from them as Michael and T-Bag run off to catch up on the other inmates. Just then, a helicopter arrives at their location, searching the forest using its spotlight. The breakout team attempts to camouflage through the big rocks, pressing their bodies desperately against it. C-Note begins to panic, realizing that hiding from the helicopter is delaying them from reaching the airstrip. Meanwhile, Haywire walks on his own when he stumbles across a farmhouse. From a window, Haywire watches a young girl spinning the wheel of her bike. Haywire carefully approaches the girl while staring at her. Shortly after, Haywire steals the bike from her along with a helmet. Haywire takes one last look at the girl and apologizes to her before running away. Back in the forest, the breakout team manages to escape the helicopter and regroup inside the barn. Lincoln begins to protest that Michael and T-Bag are slowing them down because of the handcuffs. Upon entering the barn, Lincoln and Sucre close the doors. Sucre tries to break the chain of the handcuffs using garden shears, but the chain won't budge. Feeling impatient, Abruzzi takes an axe and slices Teabag's hand to finally release the handcuffs. Michael and the rest of the inmates stare in shock at Teabag's amputated hand. As Teabag screams in pain, the group is almost caught by a civilian, but they all manage to avoid suspicion. Soon, the escaped inmates leave Teabag in the barn while he sobs uncontrollably. Around the same time, Bellick and a group of officers are searching in the forest. The police dogs are able to recognize Tweener's scent, and they almost reach him. Hearing the dogs, Tweener runs aggressively until he ends up at a road with a line of vehicles. Tweener sneaks into a horse trailer, and he goes undetected as the trailer heads to Street Lewis. Somewhere in the city of Chicago, Vice President Reynolds learns that her funding for the presidential campaign has been cut. When she asks Brinker the reason behind it, Brinker tells her that the company no longer thinks of her as a competent official. In reply, Reynolds dares Brinker, insisting that the company does not know her well. Before Brinker leaves, she advises Reynolds to voluntarily step down in the presidential race if she does not want the company to do it for her. Few days later, Vice President Reynolds stands behind a podium while talking to a group of journalists. Just then, the journalists start murmuring to each other, creating a commotion inside the room. A Secret Service agent whispers something to Reynolds, causing her to drop the bottle of water she was holding. Back in the infirmary, a man is inspecting the door. The man tells Warden Pope that the door was not forced open and that the prisoners just walked right in. A nurse intervenes, saying that it is impossible for them to just walk in because the medical personnel lock the door every night unless someone left the door open for them. Later, Katie is summoned by Warden Pope in Fox River. Pope insists that the door was left open, pressuring Katie to admit the truth. As Pope threatens her job, Katie is forced to tell him that it was Sarah who left the door open because Sarah has feelings for Michael. Warden Pope proceeds to call Governor Frank to tell him about the incident with Sarah. Governor Frank, however, cuts him off and tells him to turn on his TV before hanging up. Pope heads into his office to check the news, where he finds out that the current U.S. President Richard Mills is pronounced dead due to an alleged cardiac arrest. The news also reports that in effect, Vice President Reynolds is automatically sworn in as the President of the United States. On the outside, the Chicago police officers have arrived at Sarah's residence with a warrant to enter her apartment. When Sarah does not answer them, the police kick the door open. They find Sarah in her living room, lying unconscious with an emptied vial of morphine and a syringe on her table. Meanwhile, Veronica has arrived at Blackfoot, Montana, and is driving on a dark road on the way to the mansion. Oblivious to the fact that Nick is dead, she calls Nick's phone to thank him for his efforts in helping Lincoln. When she reaches the mansion, she catches sight of Terrence Stedman from the window. Veronica quietly enters the mansion, slowly looking around. Eventually, she finds Terrence in a living room, sitting idly on his couch. Having found Stedman alive, the most crucial piece of evidence to prove Lincoln's innocence, Veronica witfully greets him. In the Goose Park airstrip, Maggio arrives in a jet plane, waiting for Abruzzi and the breakout team. The pilot of the plane begins to grow anxious while listening to the officers from the radio, but Maggio remains calm. After a while, an airstrip controller approaches them. As an excuse, Maggio tells the airstrip controller that they had a mechanical problem, but will leave as soon as it gets fixed. Shortly after, the controller leaves, but proceeds to call the authorities about the jet plane in the place. When Maggio and the pilot notice that the police are approaching, they are left with no choice but to start the plane. Around the same time, the remaining members, Michael, Lincoln, Sucre, C-Note, and Abruzzi, are close to the airstrip. Just then, a police vehicle spots them and demands them to stop, but the inmates run ahead. To their dismay, the breakout team arrives at the airstrip just as the jet plane lifts off. They find themselves stuck in the middle of the runway, almost surrounded by police vehicles. Without any other options, Michael instructs the whole team to run into the dark as the chase continues between them and the officers.